This is Designing Security Products, where we talk about the intersection of cybersecurity, research, and product design. And today I'm talking with Heidi Trost, user experience researcher and designer, speaker, usability expert at Voice and Code, and she is also the author of a new book, Human-Centered Design. So, hi Heidi, thanks for meeting with me today.
Hi. Yes, thanks for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Yeah, I think the way we met was over a LinkedIn post that we both had commented on, and actually two different people had said, "Hey, I think you should read this post because it's talking about something you're passionate about." And someone else had tagged you as well, and so that's kind of the way we got connected and found that we both have a heart for good UX and then also for cybersecurity. So why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, there's not much to know. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm a recovering UX designer, UX researcher. I've been helping design digital products for a long time. And I went down the security rabbit hole, probably about 5 or 6 years ago now. And I realized it's actually a user experience issue. When a user encounters a pop-up they don't understand that's talking about security, when they get an email message that's talking about their account and they're not sure what to do, those are all user experience issues. And once I figured that out, I'm a little dense, so it took me a few moments. But once I figured that out, I was like, this is something I can help with. I understand how to fix user experience issues. So once I figured that out and I really found my passion around and met a lot of people in the cybersecurity community, I was hooked. And yeah, that's how I got here.
Very cool. And so just knowing that, I think this is kind of one of the things that I always loved about doing UX on a product design is the decisions that you're helping figure out, right, just have a big impact on tons of people that are going to be using this application, making their lives maybe just a little bit better, right?
Yeah, I think what I really like about the cybersecurity community is that ultimately people want to help other people, right? People in cybersecurity want to help people, even the super technical folks. And I really, really appreciate that. And that, kind of stirs my heart as well. If I'm going to be working on something, I want to be working on something to help people and help keep people safe.
Yeah. Awesome. So maybe tell me a little bit about Voice and Code. What is Voice and Code, and how did you get involved in that?
Yeah, so Voice and Code is my consultancy, and I started it as a basically how to improve the customer user experience. So I was helping design digital products. So that was 15 years ago. So fast forward, now I'm solely focused on cybersecurity and kind of from different angles. I like to say that I speak multiple security dialects, which is really funny because on LinkedIn, the jobs that it shows me are for an interpreter. And I was like, yeah, I am an interpreter, but not in the way that you think, LinkedIn. So what I mean by that is that I see security from a bunch of different angles. I see it from the end user's side, right? And they're just like, oh, security, it's just one more thing. I don't understand it. All these words, these acronyms. And then I see it from the security practitioner's point of view. And I've designed digital products for security practitioners. I see it from the compliance point of view, right? I look at the different standards and I have been involved in folks trying to comply with those standards. I see it from the CISO's perspective. I see it from the engineer's perspective, the product manager's perspective. Even, in doing my own podcast, Human-Centered Security, I've tried to pull from all of these different disciplines and trying to learn from these folks. So I try to kind of bring this 360 view to the security user experience. And again, kind of speaking those different languages helps out a lot. So you asked, what do we do? So I, as an interpreter, as someone who speaks multiple security dialects, really I act as a facilitator, which I think UX, this probably resonates with you. UX people are kind of natural facilitators. So I bring these people together. I try to bring the right people together, the people who need to be in the room together, and help them ask the right questions. So I do this through workshops. I do this through speaking. I do this through writing. So that is what Voice and Code does. It acts as a facilitator.
Very cool. Is there a specific story maybe that you could tell where there was an assumption that maybe the client had that there was kind of a strongly held belief, but then through research, you were able to determine that that's not really the way that customers see it, that they see it a different way.
Yeah, this is kind of a different angle. I don't know if this is what you're going towards, but like one of the cybersecurity products that I worked on, one of the assumptions was that folks that our customers were kind of in the product all day, every day, or at least every day, right? That they were logging in and that they were using it, and that they had a certain level of security knowledge. And that was kind of baked into the product, kind of that super user level. What we found out was that actually wasn't true at all. There was only a very small percentage of users who were opening the product, and certainly a very small percentage who were using it all day, every day. And in fact, some users didn't really have a security background at all, and were just doing the best that they could, on the teams that they had with the resources that they had, and we're just kind of trying to make sense of it all. They were trying to keep their organization safe, but they didn't know as much as the folks who were using the product all day, every day. So we had, kind of these super users, and then we had these folks on the other end who maybe, would log in like once a month, maybe like once a quarter. So those are completely different experiences, and those folks have completely different needs. And unfortunately, we were designing for the one end, but we weren't designing for the other.
Okay, so how did you? This is this is really interesting. So how did you adapt? Right? How did you adjust for this?
So this was a kind of a long tail adaptation, right? It wasn't something that we fixed overnight. The first step was, I think, convincing the leadership team that this was indeed what was happening. So what we ended up doing was leveraging behavioral analytics and kind of showing like this is how people are using the product. And then we supplemented that with qualitative one-on-one interviews that we had with our customers to say, like, let us paint a picture of like the reality of what they're dealing with right now. And it's different than kind of how we've portrayed or personified our customer. And that we had to get over that hurdle of like, we're kind of like going in the wrong trajectory here, and like we need to switch course. And like, that was kind of the major thing that we needed to get over first before we said, okay, are there things that we can do to help folks with onboarding, right? Like, with security products, it's not just enough to buy the products. Like there's a whole lot of things that need to go on to get it set up in the customer's environment. And there's a lot of hurdles to that. So can we make that easier? Can we make it easier to run the reports that they need? Can we make it easier for them to kind of see a snapshot of their environment that is easier to digest? Can we have a point of view with the products that kind of guides them along the desired path, or the path that we think that will be most beneficial in keeping their environment safe? So I know those are kind of like high, overarching things, but it really was a stepped process, and it started first with convincing stakeholders that this is indeed a problem.
Sure. And I guess a problem that is important enough to be solved too, right? Because there's always going to be problems. So it comes down to how do you
always be problems.
That's right. Then how do you prioritize, right? How do you determine that this problem over here is greater or lesser than this problem that's over here, especially if you're seeing both of those in the research? It's showing that, different customers are struggling with different things, right?
Yeah. And I want to say, like, this isn't unique to security. Like, you've probably seen this.
Absolutely.
I've seen this in nearly every product, especially like enterprise product that I've worked on. And so some of the, the takeaways are the same. Like when I say you really need to understand the security practitioner's workflow, well, you would have to understand the workflow of any other user of any other enterprise product as well. They just, as security people, tend to have just like very complex workflows.
Right. And the tools are really complex too, right? The things that they're doing, yes. It's not just booking a hotel room, which for the most part, there's a existing pattern. If a new startup comes out and they've got some new twist on how you can, just even thinking about Airbnb versus booking something on hotels.com. Yes, there are differences in that, but there's kind of a well-worn path on how you're going to pick the dates and pick the location and determine with ratings and all of those things. But security seems to be much more different than that, right? Like if you're on one side of security, maybe you're in the identity space, and then on the other side you're dealing with something that's threat detection, then those could be drastically different, and the paths don't seem to be as well defined. So what have you done when the path is not as well defined on how to solve this specific problem? Any tips?
Yeah, well, I think what you're saying really resonates with me in the sense that most people have booked a hotel room or booked a flight online. So like those patterns are something that are familiar. Like you understand the steps that you have to go through. Would you still need to do user research? Of course you would, but at a high level, it sort of makes sense to you. As a UX person who is in the cybersecurity realm, you've probably never thought about these things, the way that a security practitioner would. So there is a little bit more of a hurdle, I think, and there are all these terms and acronyms and, all those, other things. In terms of understanding those workflows and understanding the mindset, the goals, the needs of a security practitioner. Again, it's not all that different from other domains, but one of the things that my team and I have done in the past is sit with a security practitioner. I'm thinking of one scenario where we actually sat with a security analyst lead or manager, and he walked us through how he would train his junior analysts on how to use the product and what their workflows were and what they should be looking for at each part of the process. So like the way that he had broken it down was like, okay, first you start here. And if you see this, then you look at this, 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 and this. If it's this other thing, then you look at that. So even though it was very complicated and there was a lot to unpack, there was a process behind what he was describing. And what we did is like, as he was describing it, we just mapped it out. We opened up Miro and we literally mapped out the process. Was it huge and a behemoth? Yeah, it was. But it helped us understand like there is a rhyme and reason to this. It's not utter chaos, right? Even though like sometimes you look at the product and you're like, oh my gosh, this is utter chaos. Like how are they even making sense of this? But there was some rhyme and reason to it. And once we were able to unpack it, first of all, we were able to ask a lot better questions, right? So like when we would sit down with these security practitioners, we could ask them more informed, more insightful questions. The other thing we did is we had monthly, I want to say like all hands, but like literally everyone at the organization was invited to sit in on watching the security practitioner do their job. They were literally like in the midst of triaging alerts and we were observing, and they were senior enough so they could kind of walk us through like what they were doing as they were doing it. But that was also like immensely helpful, like literally watching someone, use the product in the wild, having them narrate what their thought process was, that was invaluable. And like I said, everyone at the organization was invited to these. So the customer success managers, the product managers, the engineers, the UX people, everyone was involved in this so that we could all collectively have a shared understanding of what our users do and what some of their pain points were.
Super interesting. I have yet to get to work with a company that I guess is large enough and puts that much importance on everybody understanding that experience. That sounds super, super powerful. So how was that received by the group?
Oh, it was amazing. And what we did with it started conversations. So within the UX team, like we would do a Slack and like summarize because obviously not everybody could, they were recorded, but not everyone could attend. So we'd, have like a summary of the different bullet points of like the things that we saw that we thought were really interesting that other people would find helpful. And then it started conversations with like cross-disciplinary conversations. So when I talked to the customer success managers, like I'd be like, oh, did you see, X, Y, and Z happen on that latest, I'm trying to think what they were called. It was called something specific.
They probably had an acronym for it, right?
Yeah, probably. But it was kind of like a sit-in, like a monthly sit-in. So yeah, so then it prompted conversations because other people in different disciplines and different teams were watching the same thing. It prompted conversations, which to me, that's super important. I truly think that cross-disciplinary collaboration is so, so important.
I would wear that t-shirt too. Yes. Absolutely. I want to go back to something before when you were talking about the security practitioner and they were outlining their workflow and how they would train a new person.
Mm-hmm.
How often were they switching between different tools in their workflow? Like they might be using the product that you're using, but then they're switching over and using a different product and coming back. And how
Yeah.
important is it for you to understand that part of the process and kind of where the product you're working on fits in?
Well, so that became apparent during those sit-ins that I was talking about, because I think sometimes folks, not just security practitioners, like even if you were asking a designer, like how, they design, they would probably have something similar happen where they don't even realize how complicated their workflows are, right? So we would be watching the security analysts do their job, and they literally have like 50 different tabs open, and they're having to pull information from here, open this up, be like, oh, now I gotta go do this, now I can't log into like what's, now I have to log into this new thing. And we're just like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Like they weren't even cognizant of it. It's not that they were, most of the time they weren't even complaining about it, but from a UX person's point of view, it's like this is awful.
Yeah.
We had no idea that they were having to do this and that they have 50 tabs open and they're having to remember or copy and paste something from here and put it in here. So yeah, I mean, I would say that was like one of the major takeaways I had in some of the first few sit-ins that we did, because it just was atrocious.
Yeah, and I'm guessing you were able to fix some of those problems for that person, right? And make it where it made a little bit smoother transitioning from software A to your product and over to software C or whatever.
Right. I mean, it's as simple as asking, is there an API we can leverage? Is there, is there a way to integrate this into our products so that they're not having to do this all the time? And the answer was yes. And it, improved their efficiency quite a bit. And just made them happier.
Right, yeah.
Well, and you think of like a security analyst, like they're under intense time pressure. Like we're not talking like they have a few hours to do this. Like they have minutes. Mm-hmm. So, it's really, really important to try to shape, like having to switch into different tabs and having to switch contexts all the time. Even having to open Teams and like answer a Teams message or, to write up something for the customer. All of that context switching takes a lot of time in the grand scheme of things. Mm-hmm. A few minutes might not seem like a big deal, but it is for a security analyst.
Absolutely. I remember somewhere along the way, I heard a quote from Jared Spool, who is, can we say grandfather of UX? I don't know. He certainly seems like there's a word like paragon.
One of the,
yeah.
Yeah.
He's an OG. How about that?
An OG. I like that.
An OG yes. of UX. And he said that it's important for us to observe someone using this product, on the best day that they use this product and the worst day that they use this product. And so watching a security analyst try to use your product when everything is on fire, and understanding what that's like, that's very different. Like when you're watching this person train, then they've got a little bit of a frustration with logging in or whatever. That's no big deal. They're kind of used to that. Right. But when they're under the gun, then those things, the little annoyances are just can send them over the edge because they literally are losing data or there's infiltration or whatever, right? They're under immense pressure to get a thing done.
Well, yeah, I mean, I kind of like what you alluded to. Like we were really blessed in a way to be able to see like this in action, like see the product in the wild. Because if you think about like, we did usability studies and stuff like that. So, but it's not something that's really happening, right? It's a simulation. Like that pressure is not actually there. So it's one thing to see someone interact with the product, with fake data, like in a usability study. It's another thing to see them in something that's like actually happening in the security operations center that, could have real world consequences.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. And so I guess all of the stuff that you learned from that, you're like, I want to share this with other people. And so you did something that just seems completely scary to me, which is writing a book. So how did that come up? Like what, tell me about the process. You know what? I think I'm going to write a book.
It really, it's not that exciting of a story. I someone approached me, my book publisher, Rosenfeld Media, approached me and asked me if I was interested. And I just said yes. for some reason.
It's
But
the simplest
I'll,
user journey ever, right there.
it's the simplest user journey ever. Just say yes. But one of the things that prompted me to write the book was that I kept on encountering situations, you know, like as a UX researcher, even when I wasn't working on security products, I would observe people have questions, you know, about security or privacy, or I would see them swat away, you know, those security messages. And I was like, oh, like that, you know, that's a thing. You know, people ignore or don't understand. And people would ask me questions. They would say, "What does this mean? You know, you seem like you know what you're talking about." Like, I don't. And I would be like, "Oh my gosh, like I feel like I should know the answer to this, but like I'm not 100% sure. Like, can I just like Google it really quick?" And I can Google with the best of them, but I was still getting confused as to
Mm.
like, okay, they there's like 15 steps of this process, and if they leave one out, like they're, you know, still like their account still isn't secure. So as I was embarrassed time after time, you know, and felt like, gosh, if I can't figure this out, you know, there's no way that, you know, other people can figure this out. I started looking at, you know, are there resources for me to better understand cybersecurity? And yes, there were resources, but I didn't feel like they were specific to the security user experience. And they certainly weren't speaking in a language that I could understand easily. So because of that, I was like, well, maybe like in all of my research, maybe I can take my notes and what I'm learning and translate it for a UX audience, or at least people who are building digital products. Like
Mm.
ultimately, you know, the book is for people who build digital products. It does also, it is also applicable for folks who are, I mean, the user experience is a user experience. So it's
Agreed.
applicable to folks who are trying to, create security awareness programs within their organization, or trying, you know, for employees, trying to make employees create systems for them so they encourage the most secure actions. So anyway, that's a very long-winded way of saying there wasn't something for me that I felt like was applicable to me as someone building a digital product related to security. So I put my notes together and I have shared it with the world.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I've noticed on some of the posts that you've been putting on LinkedIn, like little snippets that I'm sure are from the book. You've focused on the idea of it's not just the security products themselves, but the security aspects of all of the products that we use every day, right? So if someone is out there that's reading your book and they're designing a fintech product, well, there's absolutely tons of security that has to be baked into that, right? And even if they're building an app that is the brand new hotel booking app that we were talking about, right? There's still some security aspects of that. And so I love that the approach that at least it seems like you're covering
Yeah,
is.
you might be giving me too much credit.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I know that the stuff that I have read of yours is really insightful. So no, I think that's, yeah, I love that I personally had not considered the security aspects of non-security apps, really, right? So I appreciate you putting the information that you have out there too. And I mean, honestly, that's part of the reason I wanted to start having these conversations, is because when I was looking, I didn't see a whole lot of experience about, or a lot of information about the intersection of UX research and product design with cybersecurity. There's tons of
Yeah.
UX and research stuff that's out there, right? And there's tons of information about the security side of things, but I hadn't seen a whole lot at that intersection. And so that's how I found you in your book. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, folks might be wondering, like, just to unpack what you talked about just now is like, okay, like so one of the major things that I get asked is like, I'm a UX designer, I'm a products person, like I don't know anything about security. Like, how does this apply to like
Mm-hmm.
what I'm working on? And my answer to that is, like you said, you are almost certainly working on something that applies to the security user experience. So like anytime you're asking users for personal information, for health information, for financial information, like that's all, you know, centered, that is protected information, and that's part of security. Anytime a user has to make a security or privacy related decision, so most apps, have, security and privacy implications. Anytime users view or modify other people's information, so maybe you're creating a healthcare app and folks are modifying patients' healthcare records or personal information. Maybe they're customer service folks who, again, are looking at customer information. Anytime a user has to sign up or log in, whenever they have to configure a product and you go through those different steps and it's like, do you want a security, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, it's too much. Like, I don't want to go through all these steps. Like, just get me to using the product. Anytime that the product can potentially influence the physical world, self-driving cars, all of those places, right? I've just like listed off like 10 of them, maybe less than 10, but those are all places where, are related to security, or they're related to trust, which is also related to security, and they're part of nearly every single product that folks are creating today.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it's something that needs to be considered, just like all the other aspects of product design, right? It's an important thing that's there. And so appreciate you sharing, talking about your book. I do have one other question that I want to ask you. If you had one piece of advice that you could share with an early stage security product founder, what would it be?
One would be you probably don't understand the complicated ecosystem in which your end user operates within. Understanding the relationship between, the CISO and the people under them, the engineers, their relationship with leadership, who they need to get buy-in from, who they collaborate with, mapping this like organizational schema out, it's probably a lot more complicated than you think. And there might be folks who you haven't anticipated who are part of the product or part of the process, either part of the decision-making process, or they have to be kind of looped into this because of the way that they collaborate. So a lot of times cybersecurity vendors just don't understand, and they don't understand the pressures that these teams are under, and so they just like make these like flowery attestations that like, oh, we're gonna solve everything, and it's like, no, you're really not. And most of the time you just like hand them the product and you're like, bye, like thanks for the money, and like you guys go set it up yourself. Like they don't actually get the customer to the value of the product, because usually it's a lot more complicated than that. So that's one. And then two is really the workflow thing that we talk, we spend a lot of time talking about workflows, but I think a lot of times, and I don't know how you build a cybersecurity product and not understand the workflows, but it does seem to be a common theme. Again, they just don't understand the dynamics of, that particular ecosystem. Also, different customer environments are very complicated and very different. So you have to build something that's flexible enough to kind of account for that, both the people and the technology aspect of it. So I'll shut up there and see.
No,
see
I think that's no. I think that's great. You said that they probably don't understand the mapping out, or they haven't mapped out that workflow. Do you think it is that they think they understand what that workflow is, and so from their own experience, and just haven't taken time to go and watch other people go through this and map it out?
I think so. I think it's this is how I've done it before. This is how a team I worked with did it before. And you just kind of assume that what it is, and like other teams don't operate differently, or I really think there's just a lack of understanding and just an assumption that you know best, and that's just,
and we all
just
do
not
that.
going to work.
Right, and it's no knock on them. We all do that. We're all guilty of thinking that we understand what the problem is, and we know how to solve it. Right, I understand what your problem is, and I know how to solve it, and the truth is, it always ends
I feel like a UX researcher, thankfully, is we generally like, I'm just like, I have no idea. Let's talk to our users. I can't answer your question. I need to talk to someone first.
And that's the secret sauce, right? Is that someone who makes assumptions on what their customers need is never going to get to a real solution as fast as someone who goes and talks to actual users and finds out and asks questions and say, hey, does this work? And they go, no, but if you did this, it might be better. Okay, let's try that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think really like trying to partner with, I was actually talking to someone earlier today, and you mentioned like security vendors need to partner with their customers and
Mm,
really, like establish relationships to make sure that they're successful. Like you can't just sell them the thing and have them be on their merry way. Like they're probably going to actually, and this is something that we found through user research for the cybersecurity company I was talking about before. Customers needed a lot more support during that onboarding stage than we were even really equipped to handle. So I think that was something that was another thing that we figured out. Like we're not even really set up to handle and to support the level of needs that these folks need, like in their first few months of using the product.
awesome. It has been so great talking with you, Heidi. Lots and lots of fantastic insights that are there. I love the idea, and I'm inspired by the idea of having a time where everybody in the team comes together and watches a user testing session, so that then they can empathize, which is what we as UX people always talk about. And people don't have to understand what empathy is, even if they just watch these videos, they will empathize. It's
You'll
just
get it.
part
Yeah,
of human nature, right? I know
totally.
that with your book, you mentioned something about a discount code, and so we're gonna drop that in the notes when this episode comes out. But Heidi, anything else you'd like to add just at the very end here?
No, stay secure.
Nice, awesome. Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you.